Well, hello, welcome back to a boat called Wanda. Well, there's no comedy opening sequence this time, so let's just get straight into it. But before we start, I do want to say thank you to everybody that's provided comments, particularly over the last couple of updates. I've learned a lot about stainless steel in particular through comments with some of the viewers, and it's really helped me come to the conclusion as to what I want to do with the fuel tank. But anyway, let's get into it. So you can see here all of this topsides have been sanded. We're through to the white there in a couple of places, so towards the back there were some high places or high spots. The middle part of the boat was probably the best. There was just the smallest high spot where some of the repairs had previously been made, which is completely understandable. And then a little bit more work up the front. Now Rob's been helping me with the topsides as well. And in total we've probably spent about 20 hours on the topsides, and I've pretty much done a sweep of the entire boat. So it's worked out to be a lot faster than sanding back the deck, and there's really not much more to be done. However, there is a little bit of attention that needs to be done to the bow of Wanda. So as you can see from all the white spots here, there is quite a lot of high and low in the bow, and that actually corresponds to where some of the bulkheads and stringers are. And it's not uncommon to have a little bit of deflection, particularly around the bow in an old boat. And once this has got a full white gloss on, this is actually the part where you might be able to see just with your eye some ripples or indentations. So I want to spend a bit of time fixing this up. So next steps for me, I'll probably just in say 2 days do all the skimming and get it over and done with, and just probably try and drag it along this way to really get rid of those highs and lows so that I can knock it all back, and then probably just spray paint the primer on it. Well, now it's time to get back to trying some different experimental ways that I can dry out that core. So first up, I'm going to need this and some blue tack and some tape, and off we go. Now, bearing in mind, I'm about to go into that cockpit locker, which is currently 54 degrees Celsius. So that's going to be pretty uncomfortable. I'll need to be in and out like a ninja. Right, well there it is. I'm about to head into the nether regions of Dante's Inferno. Do I really want to do this? Man, that's horrible. And that's the culprit that's causing all the heat. Oh man. So I need to get in there. Maybe I'll just let it cool down a little bit. Right, so let me just mark out where I want to set this up. Cover those holes there. Now, set up a perimeter of glue tack in the hope that it'll help to create some sort of seal. Actually feel a little bit of suction through these holes, you know, and that means that it's actually drawing air up and across and down. So that's really positive, because it means if I can get this hot dry air here, it'll go up into the core, round and through here. Yep, so let's give that a go. Well, I was able to run that vacuum setup for a couple of hours, but unfortunately it gave up the ghost at that point. The problem I have is the vacuum hose that comes with that shop vac is pretty poor quality. So with a bit of warm air flowing through it and a fair amount of vacuum pressure, the hose ultimately collapsed upon itself after a couple of hours, and that put a lot of strain on the vacuum as it was basically trying to draw air through this closed up pipe. I then tried another piece of water pipe which I'd actually taken out of the boat. It was the vent that led through this cockpit coaming here. But again, after a couple of hours, warm air, that collapsed upon itself. So I was only able to run it for a few hours, but the results of that have actually been quite positive. And the good news is, even though the moisture content is too high, I can actually see it has moved. It started off at 85, and now it's down to about 78, or 80 down to 70 here. So the good news is if I can draw air through the core, I can affect the moisture content, and so this is obviously the way to go. Now Rob's gone away for a while, but he's been kind enough to let me have full use of his beast of a compressor here. Given that the sand has arrived, I think now I can try out some DIY grip blasting. And I've got this test piece here set up outside to have a go on first. Now this is the underside of the main hatch, and as you can see it's got exactly the same type of residue that is all throughout the cockpit locker and around the bilge. So theoretically, if it can knock this off here, then it should be able to knock the stuff off down in the bilge. So the main components are this handheld gun, I guess, some protective clothing, medium texture sand, then an air hose. Now the question is, can I remember how to fire up this beast and then tame it to be like a pussycat? Main switch, check. Pressure release, check. Fuel on, a bit of choke, a bit of throttle. Sweet! Well, the bottom line is, it works, as you can see, and that really surprised me. There's a couple of really stubborn bits that might need a bit more work, but the majority of it's come off really well. It is pretty aggressive with the amount of material it uses up, but yeah, I'm quite positive about this. I also have ordered in some 60 to 80 grit aluminium oxide, so I'll also do a test with that perhaps tomorrow when it arrives, and then just compare the difference. But before I start that, I just wanted to do this test of trying out distilled vinegar as a cleaning substance for cleaning up bronze. So here I've got one of the bronze Y joins, which takes the two scuppers that come down through the deck into one out through the seacock. So yeah, it's got a bit of green on it, but it still looks pretty good. It's pretty manky. So anyway, I'll pop it in here and cover it in distilled vinegar. Now this distilled vinegar I got from Waitrose was actually in the food section, but when I read the reviews of it, nobody's discussing using this for food. It's all about how effective it is for cleaning. So yeah, let's see how this goes. I'll leave it a couple of days and come back and have a look. Okay, well I'm down here in this little tented up world. I've got a roof that I've made. I've got sides there out of plastic all around the front here. So this whole bilge and engine room compartment is completely encapsulated now, so with all the grit flying around, hopefully it'll be contained in this space and I can vacuum it up and try and get a second or third go out of it. Okay, I think I'll start up in that back corner, that's the worst, so I'll just get that airline set up and get going. But let's take a peek to see how that first session of grip blasting went. So yeah, it's pretty good. It is slow going and you need to be quite painstaking if you're trying to get every little piece of that residue out. But if you're persistent, you can actually get everything, every little last bit out. So yeah, this part here is pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with that. I went over it a couple of times, and I just want to give it a bit of a wash now. Wipe it down with some acetone, and then see if that's basically will make it ready for flake coat. And then let's take a look under here. Yeah, that's all pretty good. So this is what it looked like before, and this is it now. Okay, well I'm back with a new grade of grit for trying to blast the inside of the bilge this time. So yesterday I used just the general coarse sand, and the nice thing about it is once you've used up the grit, you can just basically vacuum it up and then just try and get rid of the dust and other things that have been picked up in the way, and then you put it back and you have another go. So right, I've come back today with this, and what this is an aluminium oxide 60 to 80 grit. So this should be a lot coarser than what I used yesterday. Well, actually that's not quite what I was expecting. For some reason in my mind I thought it was going to be really large particles, and this is really fine, although it's meant to be 60 to 80 grit. I'm not sure if this is going to do the job. Anyway, I'll put it in there and see what happens. Well, that aluminium oxide 80 grit didn't necessarily do any more damage than the sand did. In fact, I think the sand is probably more abrasive. I found that with the 80 grit aluminium oxide, it was able to sort of cover a bit larger area, and it was very good at getting things like the oil out, but it wasn't quite as good as getting that really thick adhesive out of the crack. There is one last thing I'd like to try before I give up on the idea of grit blasting the inside of the bilge. So I've just ordered up some crushed glass, which might be more abrasive than either the sand or the aluminium oxide. So that will be here in a couple of days, and I guess that's the last chance to see if it's possible to remove all that flake coat using a grit blaster. Given that I want to get started, I'm just going to go up whilst it's all tented up nicely with the grinder once again, and using one of these polycarbide discs, I'm going to try and take as much of the flake coat off as I can get to, and then once the crushed glass arrives I can try and use that to get the remainder off. Right, I'll get back in there. Well, I'm back here in the bilge of contortion, and it's called that because of the incredibly challenging positions I've had to get my body into in order to get to the very bottom of this bilge cavity. I have spent 4 days coming in and working on this area, and it's the most difficult, fiddly, time-consuming job I've done on Wanda so far. Basically just using my angle grinder, my 30mm belt sander, my power filer and this Dremel, I've managed to knock off all of the flake coat and sort of expose what was going on down here. Now what was quite interesting is the supports that the tank was placed upon is actually part of an entire false floor, and it raised the bottom of the bilge by about 50mm at the end to create like a level for it to get the water to drain down towards the front and create the stand for the bilge. Now as I was taking it out I could see that there were bits like this where there was black, which I guess is that diesel, and you know, sure enough the moisture meter was going crazy at this. I did find the tabbing right at the front had opened up, so the diesel had penetrated through the tabbing, and that seems to be the case all through the boat. Wherever there's new glass that's laid on top of the old glass like tabbing, that's the part that the diesel's infiltrated and then broken that bond. So this was all tabbed in, the diesel got under the tabbing, and all of this foam, I'm not sure if you can see here, I can actually squeeze it and you know, get this black moisture in it, so it's saturated. And it does actually just smell like, it smells like a petrochemical, so it's not probably oil, it's diesel. So that's all come up, so let's take a look at this train wreck. Now to give you an idea of how fiddly it was, the only way I could get to the very bottom down there was by leaning down and just using the very, very tip of that 30mm belt sander. So it was great that I was able to get access all the way down there, but it was so difficult to do, and so because I could only use the tip, I've got quite a sort of scalloped effect all the way up and down here, so I think I probably need to sort of fill it up with some epoxy filler to try and flatten it out a bit before I try and laminate it. But there's that flat floor. That's the sort of shadow or residue of where the tank support was. Okay, well as you can see there's quite a large area of don't know how to describe it. I guess it's just like a black line in the laminate, and I suspect that that's diesel. Yeah, you can see it there all the way down to the bottom. And the other thing is, more so down the bottom, well, there's one. There was a lot of voids in the fiberglass, so with these voids I just got the Dremel out and it basically just opened up this big hole where all the diesel had accumulated and eaten through the laminate. So there's quite a few sort of voids, or voids that have turned into quite large cavities, and they'll need to be filled up and dried out. So you can see there's quite a bit to do here, and the laminate's in pretty poor condition, and obviously the diesel sort of got through everywhere. And just to follow due process, let's get my favourite little friend out here and let him go for it. Yeah, lovely, just what I thought. Beautiful, spectacular, fabulous. Keep it up. What about there? Hey, oh, a dry spot. Oh, okay, that's more like it. So the bottom line is this bilge area is going to need a lot of work. Obviously the diesel's impregnated at least the port side, and so that needs to be addressed first. So I need to try and dry it out, get that diesel moisture out of the laminate, and then probably put several layers of good quality epoxy cloth back into this bilge to try and add a little bit more strength to these walls, and I might probably go around to the outside and take the gel coat off there as well, just to check to see if anything's come through. So I got Rob, who works here at the boatyard, to come around yesterday and use his peeler to take off all the gel coat, as you can see here, and that took about 2.5 hours, this side and the other. So yeah, it's a very quick way of getting it off. And I just basically wanted to have a good look at this side, which is where the fuel tank cavity is, just to make sure there was no damage or stress cracks on the laminate. Okay, there's one other little repair that I need to do that I discovered as I was working around here. I saw a crack here. And when I got behind the crack, I could see that there was some rotten, probably plywood here. So I suspect this is a little bit of a dam that they've built up, and there's like something solid on the top of this. We'll go around and have a look. Okay, so now we're in the aft cabin, and down the bottom here, this is the other side. There's this little bit of tabbing here that's been knocked off. And I saw this ages ago, so I knew this was here. This is very, very solid. It'll be interesting to see what's underneath this. Okay, so I just need to take this all back and see what's underneath it, and then probably knock back this old piece of plywood dam and possibly fill it up again, depending on the quality of the material in here. Okay, so that'll do it. And this is one of the first things I've uncovered in a long time where it's actually pretty trivial. There's nothing too bad about it. The resin that's poured in there looks pretty good. Obviously, there's a little bit of timber that I've got out at the front. So yeah, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Just put some epoxy laminate over this to cover over that gap and tab it over. Yeah, no waiting for it to dry out or anything complex, so yeah, pretty easy. Right, well, it's time to wrap up for the week, but before I do that, I just want to go back and do a recap on all the experience I had with grip blasting over the week. I tried 3 different types of medium for grip blasting. I started out with this medium density sand. I then tried this 60 to 80 grit aluminium oxide, and then finally the last one I tried is this coarse crushed glass. And the bottom line is, if you were interested in trying this yourself to clean the inside of the boat or the inside of the bilge, nothing that I tried would really take all the flow coat off the inside. Maybe you need a stronger compressor. So the best result I got was using this medium grade sand, and I found that it was able to get rid of all the flow coat that was starting to come apart, so it sort of would knock that off. It got rid of all that residue, and it got rid of a lot of that sort of in-ground oil. The best thing if you just want to have a bit of a clean, like if you've got a really dirty bilge and you've got in-ground oil or grease or dirt in all the sort of pores, I would probably go for aluminium oxide because it tended to sort of spray a little bit wider and was a little bit more effective at getting the smaller stuff out. And finally, the crushed glass just didn't work for me, and it could be that it's the wrong compressor because this is very coarse. It's about 1 mil by 2 mil. Yeah, so that's my experience of grip blasting, and I hope you find it useful. And finally, let's take a look at this Y-piece, which has been soaking in vinegar for quite a few days now. The first thing you can notice is it's a lovely aquamarine sort of blue colour, and I guess that's the copper oxide that's coming out of the bronze. There was a bit of green sort of on the side, but wow, look at that. That's surprising. Let me just give it a little bit of a clean up with this brush. So it's actually got all the old sort of pipe sealant out as well, which is good. I'm really surprised how much of the gunk it's taken off, and it's almost sort of stripped it right back. So there we go. That's what it looks like before, and this is what it looks like after sitting in distilled vinegar for 3 or 4 days. But as pretty as it looks, I'm just a little bit worried about the colour because it looks more like copper than bronze, and I suspect the zinc has actually leached out of it a little bit. So I'm not sure if I can still use this, if I will have to buy another one or not. Yeah, if anyone has any ideas, let me know. But yeah, that was a really effective test, so I'm pleased I did that. Right, so next week's going to be a very busy week. I'm going to go nuclear on the war on moisture. I've got moisture in the core that I can dry out. I know I can do that now, I just need the right equipment. And with all that diesel moisture that's in the bilge, I've also got a fairly industrial solution to try and get rid of that. Oh, and finally, I've decided that I'm not going to go with a plastic tank, and I'm not going to go with a stainless steel tank. There's a third option that I didn't really consider last time, but I'll tell you more about that next time. So I'll see you then. Cheers.